Get started, I wanted to introduce Dennis Machado. He's the safety manager for WorkLogic HR and deals with these issues we're talking about today for a whole host of different companies. So he's a great resource, and take advantage by asking him lots of questions. Welcome.
Okay, well, my name is Dennis Machado. I'm the safety manager for WorkLogic. I probably have one of the most interesting jobs in the world because I go around to all of our clients, their facilities, conduct inspections, trainings. So I get to see pretty much everything under the sun. Today I could be at a plastic surgery center in Beverly Hills. Tomorrow I could be at a chemical manufacturing plant in Mojave. The next day I could be in Compton at a woodworking facility. Or then the following day I can be in Bakersfield at a restaurant. So I get to see a lot of different things, a lot of different work sites. And unfortunately, I've built up a pretty good library of very common exposures and risks in the workplace, just based on going around and doing these assessments. So the title today is Common Safety Risks in the Workplace. These are very common things that when you walk around your facility, very easy to see, but oftentimes people just walk right by, not really realizing that this is in fact an actual safety risk. So to get started, we're just going to go through real quick on the IIPP. Who here doesn't know what the IIPP is, the Injury and Illness Prevention Program? Everyone's pretty aware. Okay, so as far as number one, of the elements, the responsibility, so who's in charge, who's responsible for implementing the program. Number two, the compliance. So what method do you have in place to ensure that your employees are following safe and healthy work practices? And this is a big one from a compliance standpoint as far as, how do you ensure your employees are actually doing the things you have outlined in the workplace? And one of the things is actually a discipline program, which unfortunately doesn't really come into play a lot of times with some of these exposures and risks. Number three is communication. So how do you communicate the hazards in the workplace to your employees, trainings, written programs, all of those types of things. Hazard assessments, which is kind of what we're going to focus a little bit on today. When and how you assess the hazards in the workplace, evaluate those hazards. Accident exposure investigation, which is basically just that, investigating incidents in the workplace. Also risks that could be identified from your employees. 6, hazard correction, so how you're correcting the hazards that are exposed in the workplace. The training and instruction, how you're training your employees, when you're training your employees, when you first established your program, when you first hire an employee or when an employee gets new responsibilities within the workplace that has new exposures, so being able to train them for that. And then of course record keeping is the 8th element, tracking your training, tracking your inspections, and those types of things. So without further ado, we're going to get into the fun part of this presentation. There's going to be a lot of photos. The hazard assessments, again, these are very basic things. When you're walking through your facility, whether it's a warehouse, whether it's a yard, whether it's a doctor's office, there's all types of very common exposures that are out there. And we're just going to go through some of the very basic ones to begin with. So the first one is housekeeping. Housekeeping as far as keeping your aisleways clear, your work surfaces clean. This right here is an example. This is a woodworking facility. It's actually a really cool device. These are pressure mats right here. They do a pretty good job of guarding. But the sawdust on the floor right here, sawdust on a smooth cement surface, what's that create? Pretty slippery. It's like ice. Okay, so their employees, even though they try to do a good job with guarding their machines, their employees walking on the sawdust on a cement floor, really slippery and creates a pretty significant slipping hazard. This is a bakery. They have a very nice drainage system, slope floor, okay, but do you guys notice how much water is here on the floor? Again, a cement floor, water on the floor, what's that create? Essentially an ice rink, okay? So this client actually has had 5 claims so far in 2014, and 2 of them are from slips and falls. They have obviously water, which has caused one of the incidents, but they also have flour, which is very similar to obviously sawdust. Put flour on a slick surface, and down you can go. This is a good one. This is a machine shop. So what are some of the common housekeeping things here that you're going to see? Yeah, cords. How many times do one of your employees grab a tool, go across, do some work, leave it there, go off to another job, leaving that cord across the floor, creating a tripping hazard? But also, you got this guy back here working at his station with all of his equipment or all of his materials around his feet. Okay, that right there is creating another hazard. Okay, so these are things, again, with just walking through your shop. It doesn't even have to be a scheduled inspection, but walking through your area, you can see these things that your employees do without thinking about that are creating risk for your company. Okay, this is another example of some cords. This is a walkway right here, or an entryway into the building. So right when you walk in, you have this nice bundle of hoses. Okay, now I don't know about you, but generally speaking, when I'm at work, okay, I'm walking around, I'm probably on my phone checking something, or I'm reading something, or I'm talking to somebody, walking to and from different areas in the office. Most times I'm not going to look down and see where I'm walking. Okay, so if that's the case, you're in a hurry, you walk into this building, gonna probably trip over those hoses. This is a good one. Okay, how many of your employees, might store some items at work? They don't necessarily think about, okay, housekeeping, or they don't necessarily think about leaving a walkway available for other people, or they probably don't think about creating tripping hazards. They're probably told, hey, I need to store this, so I'm just going to go plop, there you go. Okay, over time, you get this, which, what if there's an emergency in this facility right here, and they have to go out that back door or try to get out through that gate? No chance. This is a doctor's office. Okay, very small facility. How many of you guys have a pretty small office facility? Pretty tight quarters. Okay, what happens? Okay, you start to store one thing, you store another. Next thing you know, you get this right here, which is the items you're starting to store get out into the walkways. Okay, now you're creating a tripping hazard just by how you're storing your items. Based on time, I have about 1 million different examples of this, but storing boxes stacked up on top of each other. These ones are empty, but a lot of times those are full of files, materials, other things that need to go away. Okay, they start to get stacked up pretty high. Now all of a sudden you have an employee, let's say office staff, who's not used to handling material, and you say, hey, I need you to go get A, B, and C, from this box. Now they're reaching up over their heads, grabbing a 20-pound box, trying to wiggle it free, okay, putting their bodies in a compromised position. Now somebody gets hurt. Okay, so when you're walking around the facility, you start to see storage items like this. It's going to start leaking out into the walkways and creating tripping hazards. Okay. Little malfunction. This one's one of my favorite. How many of you have accounting people at your facility? They're kind of very territorial. Okay, you come into their domain, you got to be careful. Okay, so this is an accounting office at one of our clients. I guarantee you, she knew where every piece of paper, what it meant, where it was, how to find it, and if you went in and adjusted one thing, she would throw a fit. Okay, but as you see, not only tripping hazards, but you start to stack things haphazardly. You're starting to create an incident where you can get struck by a falling object, which happens quite often in the workplace. So the next photo here, she was giving me the evil eye for taking pictures of her facility. So right when you walk into her office, I get that a lot too. People look at me like, what are you doing taking a picture of mine? Right when you walk in, probably not a good idea to have a space heater on a cardboard box right next to a bunch of stacked up papers. Okay, needless to say, I took 2 really quick ones and I got out of Dodge because she did not look too happy. And this is another one. This is a doctor's office here. Okay, again, a small office. They don't have a lot of storage space. Employees told to put something away. They found an area that looked like a good place. It's out of the way. Problem was, it's blocking the exit. Okay, so you have a bunch of buckets, you got boxes, you got other materials. Okay, an employee is not going to think about keeping an exit clear. They're thinking about just getting it stored, getting it out of the way. I don't want to have to deal with it. And now you have an exposure or a hazard. Okay, this one. It's not very common, but it's kind of funny, so I included it. This is another medical facility, and it doesn't look like much, but that tile that's open right there, the situation here was employees started to complain about a smell. And it went on for about 2 weeks, and the supervisor there's like, whatever, just deal with it. It's nothing, I'm not dealing with that. So the employees started walking around like this, kind of making all the little funny gestures in front of patients. So then the manager finally got a ladder, climbed up, moved that tile, and down fell a giant dead rat and a bunch of rat feces and all of that stuff. Come to find out, they had about 12 dead rodents up there in a medical facility where you're going to get your treatment. So they ended up having to have somebody come in and obviously deal with that. So one of the issues with this is when your employees make you aware of some sort of exposure or hazard in the workplace, you need to address that. Okay? You can't just kind of put it off like, no big deal. Okay? Because if you don't address it, no big deal, 2 weeks later something happens, okay, it increases your and your company's liability. Okay, common electrical hazards. These ones are rather common here. This is a warehouse. I could show you about 25,000 photos of this actually happening in office facilities, but blocking access to electrical panels. You notice the blue? There's going to be a lot of that blue, that same facility, medical facility with the rodents. But this is just obviously a breaker box. Right here, you have an open breaker. So it's essentially exposed live wires. This one is the receptionist desk. Okay? Very common to not have your outlets guarded. Again, having exposure to live wires. This one you find all the time, extension cords, okay? Broken outer sheaths, or what you get with here is you get the electrical tape or duct tape. Okay, so I can tell you this, you're going to spend more probably in duct tape and electrical tape than it would cost for you to replace the cord itself. Okay, so instead of having this where you MacGyver something together, just replace the cord. And that's one of the things that don't get inspected very much, okay, and it's left up to the employees to kind of rig it back together because they don't want to have to deal with it. But that's something that you want to make sure you address. This one, most people think I'm crazy because when I go in and do inspections, I focus on this kind of stuff. I call this a little rat's nest. Okay, a lot of workstations. How many of you have this under your desk? Be honest. I know I do. Okay, power strips, cords, computer cords, all of this stuff. I make it a big deal because we had a client, their employee, she was sitting at her desk, had to get up in a hurry to go deal with an emergency. Foot got stuck, body twisted. Tore all the ligaments in her knee. On the way down, as she was falling, hit her forehead on the cabinet behind her and split it open. All because of that. How much time do you think it would take to get that pushed off to the side, secured so it's not a tripping hazard? 10 minutes, okay? Now, that one incident, because of something as simple as that client now has a surgery on their record, all of the rehab that goes into a surgery, all of the missed time for work comp, that's going to be one expensive claim, okay, for something that would have taken 10 minutes to address. And this is something, again, when you're walking around, you can see these things. These are very simple, right out in the open type exposures. Okay, Ingenuity at its best. That is an extension cord up top in a shop where you can kind of pull it down, okay, it retracts. They needed to make a little bit of they needed more power access, so let's go ahead and splice together a power strip into my extension cord, little tape around there, and away we go. This one's small, I apologize, but I had to put it in there because it's too good. Okay, this is a warehouse facility. Up here, do you see this cord? It goes up, and they spliced into power up top. Okay, so the employee climbed up on top of the shelves by himself, spliced into the electrical, ran the cord down the back of the file cabinet so he could create his own power outlet. Asked why he did that? Well, I wanted to hook up my fan and my radio so I could have a more comfortable workstation. Okay, that's a big problem. When you get your employees who aren't trained electricians starting to splice into things and creating their own little power supply so they can have a fan and a radio and work in comfort. Okay, so that one, I always enjoyed that one. Powered industrial trucks. Who here has forklifts? Okay, very common things. This happened about a week ago. This guy was going, I swear, about 70 miles an hour in his shop, weaving in and out of things, almost ran me over. Not wearing a seatbelt, just to begin with, as I was scrambling to try to get a picture of this guy. Obviously not doing any of the operating rules that come with forklifts. This one right here, this is a woodworking facility. What do you notice here? Yeah, can't see where he's going, number one. He had to lift his load up over this area and lift it and to maneuver around employees working at their workstations. Pretty dangerous. This is that same facility. I was a little late with my camera and I was so devastated that I missed it. This guy got this load from up here. It was so heavy that the forklift was teetering back wheels off the ground because, well, number one, this is a pretty rough potholey surface to be operating a forklift. Number two, the load too heavy for the forklift that he's operating and way up high, okay, teetered up like this, bounced back down, lowered it really fast and just tailed off. So these types of operating practices, okay, happen all of the time, unfortunately, in the workplace. And these are things, as an employer or as a supervisor, you see these things, they've got to be corrected. What do you got here? That's me over there, by the way. Pretty hard to use the seatbelt when it's connected back behind the seat. The seatbelt gets in the way. It prevents me from getting in and out of the forklift quickly. Okay? So when you see things like that, are they going to be using that seatbelt anytime soon? Operating rules. Okay? Your employees using safe work practices or operating rules for specific equipment. Who's that fall on? You or them? Falls on the company and the supervisors, right? The employees are going to do what the employees do. Okay? These are things that you need to be aware of as a supervisor or an employer of what's going on in your workplace. This is a common one. How many of you see this all the time? I got some where the seat is completely gone and they just grab like a seat cushion from a regular chair. Good to go. Seatbelt's completely, the seatbelt here is actually there, but any chance that they're going to be using that seatbelt on that seat? No chance. This is a good one. Maintenance of a forklift. I said there was actually nothing there when I did the initial inspection. Told them they needed to secure that. They go, okay. So they grabbed a coat hanger. It's secured, you didn't say how. So that's on me for not being specific on how to correct that. Okay, machine guarding. This one we could, well, all of these subjects really, we could spend probably 9 years on each and every one of them. I don't know why, I see this one all the time. Okay, unguarded abrasive wheel grinders. Okay, so you're missing here, missing part of the guard here. That happens all the time in pretty much every shop that I go into. So a lot of times, obviously, a new one will come in. What do the employees do first? Pop off some of the guards because they're easy to use. Again, that's something as a supervisor, if this exposure is in your workplace, you need to be aware of that. You need to be able to see that and you need to be able to correct that. Machine shop, a giant lathe. Who here has lathes or around lathes, knows a lot about lathes? Anyone? Pretty hard to guard these things. It can be pretty expensive. Nonetheless, okay, there needs to be some sort of guard in place, whether it's an actual physical guard or whether it's a procedure that gets employees back away from the exposure. This is just a very common basic. What here needs to be guarded? The wheel. Okay, it's just a pinch point. Very easy fix, but it's just one of those things that, again, goes unnoticed because they don't check. Okay, this is a roll right here. This is in a facility. They do really nice work, actually. They make laminate floors. I'm trying to get a good deal from them right now. But so again, just unguarded rolls here. Okay, all of these little wheels that are coming together create pinch points. I'm going in, I need to move material, fingers get stuck, and there you go. So again, as a supervisor or as an employer, when you see these types of things, you need to know that a guard needs to be applied to any types of these pinch points, okay, where your employees are actually working. This one, okay, this is a hoist hook. What we get into a lot when it comes to a hoist is there's no safety latch. And it gets interesting when you start looking up OSHA regulations, and if you go into the general industry orders, it doesn't specifically say you have to have a safety latch. Okay, but you can go into the maritime ones and it does. So I've had people actually call me out on that? Well, it doesn't say I need to technically have a safety latch. Well, there's kind of wiggle room. Who here knows ANSI? Okay, so a lot of times if there isn't something specifically mentioned by OSHA, they're going to use what's called the National Consensus Standard, and they're going to follow up and use an ANSI standard if it's more stringent or it's better or it actually exists where OSHA's doesn't. So they'll use another organizations and say, well, you should have done this, and there you go. So when it comes to safety latches, that's kind of what I use with our clients is like, okay, well, you can say that about OSHA, but here you go. This is what OSHA's actually going to look at. This, again, is a local shop here. You got a lot of, there's a lot of different exposures here. So you got housekeeping, all of that stuff. But this guy's hand right here is by a chain. And then you got right here, you got a giant gear. Okay? They had taken off the cover on this right there that covers up the chain and gear, and it covers up the bottom because it gets in the way. They took it off, they did some maintenance, never put it back on. These are things, again, if there is going to be maintenance going on, you need to make sure when it's done, okay, everything's back where it needs to be. This one, they have a two-hand or a hand control and a foot control, but there's nothing guarding the point of operation right there. So this guy had his hand right in there, kind of maneuvering things as he's operating this press. Asked about the guard. They're a pain, don't like to use them, so we're not putting it on there. Okay, employee gets hurt, who's responsible? Goes back to the supervisors and the employer. This one, the owner of this facility could not understand how his employee got sparks in his eye, had to go to the hospital, big eye patch, and missed about 3 weeks worth of work because of an eye injury. See these two holes right here? That's because that's where the guard was attached back in the day. When you take the guard off, now it's not going to operate in the same kind of fashion, or it's not going to provide the protections. So yeah, sparks are going to come out the guy, okay, on top of the fact that he wasn't wearing PPE, which is a whole another issue. This one, they couldn't understand how their employee chopped off his finger. Well, I can see right there how that happened, okay? They actually put guards back on these saws, which was great after the fact. And then I went back about 3 weeks later, and the employees had taken the guards and tied them up in a nice little ribbon, so they were out of the way again. But again, these things, if there are guards and they're being modified or employees are doing all of the crazy things that employees do with guards, that's where your inspections and your assessments of your walkthroughs come into play to be able to see those things and prevent it from happening. Okay, hazard communication things. These are very common ones that I see. Spray bottles. Okay, does everyone here know the whole GHS, the Globally Harmonized System for Classification and Labeling of Chemicals? Okay, so within there's new labeling requirements. Okay, so you can't have an unlabeled bottle or labels like this that have been deteriorated and worn off. And this one, fast. I don't know if that means run fast, use fast, or what it actually is. So the tape and marker method isn't going to work anymore. Okay, so these are very common things that are cited by Cal OSHA. Some basic storage things. This one was a fun place to go into because I had no idea what substances, because they just all dumped them into one to kind of consolidate and be able to use buckets again. So using buckets with multiple chemicals, not being rinsed out, not being stored, and this was their storage of their chemicals. They had a spill, and they go, we'll deal with that later. Okay, thanks for warning me before I walked in there. So properly storing your substances, if there is a spill, properly cleaning it up. This is actually in a spray booth, okay, so a paint booth. An employee took some materials, poured it into a smaller container so he could use it. The container wasn't labeled, which isn't a big deal if it's something that you're handling yourself and using for that specific use. And then when you're done, either goes back or it gets disposed of. So it doesn't necessarily have to be labeled if you're using it for this one specific job and then you're done. The problem is he poured this substance into his little container and he was doing his work and then goes, all right, peace out. Day's over, went home, leaves it in an unlabeled container. Now no one knows what the heck is in there, what he was doing, what it is. Okay, so once he leaves and the job's done, he just leaves it out. Now it needs to be labeled because no one knows what it is. This one's fun. This is a employee break room at a GI surgery center. This is where you're going to eat your lunch. Right here, right here, right here. There's your specimen bag. And here's your specimen bag next to your frozen burrito. Again, I want to remind you, that's a GI surgery center. Just, you can use your imagination on what those specimens might have been. Anyway, I just throw that in because that one's one of my favorites too. Okay, common work practices and personal protective equipment hazards, or PPE. This photo I just really like because this is a heat treating place. And I show up, the guy's giving me a tour. He's like, hey, do you want to see how this works? Yeah. He just walks over and goes, pfft, flames start coming out. Really? Taking a bunch of pictures. Pretty neat setup, but again, I don't necessarily think your short little gloves and your pretty cool glasses are going to do much protection if you catch on fire. This one is pretty interesting. Okay, this is a chemical manufacturing plant. Over here, they have a lot of different acids that they're washing metal parts with. Okay, over here is kind of a soak where they have cold soak. They got really hot 160, 170 degree fluids in there that they're soaking the materials in as well. This guy has to bend down to pick up whatever it is he's working on. Okay, notice what he's got in his hand. It's got his face shield. It gets in the way of him doing this, so he takes it off. Okay, now do you think he puts it back on? Okay, well, he partially does, but he doesn't use it properly. So this one is a combination of work practice and PPE. So how he's doing his job, which is really on the employer, working off of the ground, gets in the way of him being able to wear his PPE, so he takes it off in frustration because it gets in the way when he does this. So what happens? Forgets to put it on properly, goes over here, this is about 170 degrees, drops in his bucket, splash comes up, and now we have an issue because he's not protected. On top of the fact that he also deals with those chemicals with those gloves. Big issue. Okay, so these are things when you have employees, whether they've been trained or not, okay, whether they're new or they've been there 20 years, your walk around, your assessments, okay, your most experienced operator is probably going to be somebody that does things from time to cut a corner because he's been doing it for 20 years. Rah, rah. Okay, I don't need to be told I've been doing this forever. I've never been hurt. You've never been hurt until you have. It's great. You've been 20 years, okay? What I always say, I always relate it to Vegas. At some point, Vegas is going to get you. Okay, the house always wins. So you can push your luck, but at some point, something can happen, and now you're going to have a problem. Okay, this guy, auto body shop, no gloves, grinding, sanding, buffing, no respirators. He's wearing his regular prescription glasses. Again, because he's been doing it 20 years, I've never had a problem. This is stupid. Why are you telling me this? 2 weeks after that picture, got something in his eye, missed about 2 weeks worth of work. Okay? So it doesn't matter if you've been doing it 25 years, doesn't matter if you've been doing it 25 minutes. Okay? Your ability to walk around and assess these things are going to not only help you from a compliance standpoint with Cal OSHA, but also a work comp standpoint in keeping your employees safe, which is what the IAPP is all about. Okay, these guys, chemical manufacturing place. You go around and you start seeing your employees work like this. Okay, these guys work off of the floor all day long. What do you think this is going to lead to? Back injury. These are something that you're going to want to look at and go, oh, is that possibly the best way that we can accomplish this task? Okay, so not only from a safety standpoint, but a productivity standpoint. You're not going to be very productive when you got to do this 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. At least I know I wouldn't. This is a foam factory. Okay, they get giant pieces of foam, cut it down into little pieces. These poor gals have been there, I don't know, 15, 20 years, and this is their adhesive spray station. Okay, so they spray these things with adhesive and wrap, layers around this foam. Okay, do you guys notice this down here? It's all the little fibrous glue kind of, substance that's coming out of the spray. Okay, it's all over this back wall. Do you see any PPE whatsoever? Some of the ladies have told their employer, like, I'm starting to have some complications breathing. Okay, good for you. Nothing's been done. So here's this poor guy, kind of the actual operation of just spray, 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 spray. Again, no masks, no PPE of any kind, and that one really scares me. This guy, they're going to say, I've provided him with a cart. I don't know what the big deal is. Is that cart the most appropriate for the job? So he's got a cart to transport some things, but what's it making him do? Probably the worst kind of bend over, because he kind of sticks it out and goes up and around something, picks up a box, got to do this. There's really only one way to do that, and that's just straight with your back. Again, things that you can see might not be an OSHA violation, okay, per se as far as a regulation, but can cause an injury, a pretty costly injury in your workplace. This one, again, kind of note this place has a lot of pictures. You start to see employees manufacture their own tools to accomplish their job. What's that telling you? What's that? Yeah, starting to feel some pain somewhere. Okay, so instead of me bending over and moving something, I'm going to go ahead and create some sort of makeshift tool to hook it on and drag it. Okay, which obviously is, again, not a very great way to maneuver materials. Excuse me. But it can also be things like grips. Have you ever seen anyone kind of modify a grip, make it really big? Like a screwdriver or even a pen. Like you see those big fat pens where they can kind of do this. So the wider it is, they're trying to get more comfort out of their hands because they're starting to hurt. So anytime you start to see, when you're walking around, starting to see your employees modify their instruments, their tools, anything that they're using, it's a good chance that there's already been a problem, they just haven't told you yet. So that's something to really look into. This one happens all the time. It's a respirator. Just throw it on the workbench, pick it up tomorrow, put it on, go back to work. Okay? So the proper use, maintenance of respirators, the proper use, maintenance of PPE, okay, very common things that employees will just kind of go, I'm in a hurry, I'm going to leave it there. Okay? On top of which is, the written programs and the training, all that, those are very basic things, especially with respirators that you run into that an employer doesn't have a written program, doesn't have a training program, isn't doing their fit testing or their pulmonary exams or any of that stuff. Okay, this one, you guys see what he's got here? Does anyone here know what an air bath is? Okay, so he's about to use compressed air, give himself a little shower. Okay, he's got sawdust on him, he's got, debris on him, he's trying to get that stuff off. So I'm going to click through pretty quick. Gave himself a little shower, okay, which is fine and dandy, except there's an actual regulation against that, okay, that outlines not to use compressed air to clean yourself or your clothing off. Okay, on top, why is that? Forced air is coming out pretty quick, right? Little piece of, say a little splinter of wood, right up into the eye, gets lodged in there pretty good. Now you have yourself a pretty serious injury. Okay, so did this employee know that he wasn't supposed to do that? I can answer that for you, no. They never told him not to, never trained him on any of that stuff. So he gets something lodged into his eye, falls back on the employer. Did you train your employee? No. Did you inform your employee? No. Did you correct any hazard? Nope. That's a problem, okay? So that's just an example of a work practice. What your employees are doing when you're not around or when you are around, okay, how they're doing what they're doing needs to be addressed to make sure that they're doing it in an appropriate manner. Yeah?
Do you happen to know the regulation?
Right after this, I'll pull it up for you. Okay, fall protection and ladders. I don't necessarily deal with a lot of fall protection per se. This is that same foam factory here. This is a second story. They removed the railing. You can kind of see the railing here. And so they could put their big tote of glue that those poor gals were spraying onto the foam. And this is a work table. So someone works right off of that table, right on the ledge. And someone has to hook this up by laying on the ground, kind of leaning over, popping it into place. Okay, so this is the view from the top. Second story, right over those gals spraying the adhesive. I'm sure they double knotted it when they secured it, so I felt more comfortable about it. But again, open railing, that's a giant, significant fall hazard. Ladder, okay, so what do you guys see as an issue here? Where to begin? Okay, so using the ladder in the way that it's intended, okay, it's not up over, 36 inches over the surface to be able to get onto it. A lot of issues. This is a fire escape at one of our treatment facilities. In itself, doesn't look like a big deal. Went up, took a look, here's your welds. The whole thing was rusted out. So I don't know about you, but I don't know if I want to have my life depend on something that looks like that. Okay, so obviously it had never been inspected before, which is one of the main things with ladders. Okay, this facility, kind of hard to see. You guys see this ladder on the side of the building right here? I don't have a very good picture. It's right there. Okay, it's a fixed ladder on the side of a warehouse. Excuse me. There was a storm, it's about a year and a half ago. There was a storm, lots of rain. The employee gets to work, looks up, and the gutter up there was clogged. So, being a good Samaritan, he's like, well, I'll go fix it. Climbs up this ladder on the very top, about 18 feet up, pulling stuff out of the gutter, foom, down he goes. 18 feet, falls, lands flat on his back. Problem is, okay, his job doesn't require him to use ladders. He doesn't use ladders for his work at all. Not trained on ladders, shouldn't have been on the ladder. But again, never told, never trained how. He was just being a good Samaritan, thought he was being a good employee, I'm gonna help out the company. Goes up, does something he's not supposed to do, and gets hurt. So one of the things as an employer, you wanna make sure that you're communicating to your employees, specifically with ladders or anything else, what you should and should not do. Okay? You're not trained to operate a forklift, don't drive it. You're not authorized to be up on a ladder, stay off of it. You're not authorized to use a saw, don't use it. Okay? So them understanding where they can and can't go, what they can and can't do, is equally as important. Very simple ladders, standing on the top, working away from the body. Who does this? I do this at home, I'll admit, except I'm in shorts and flip-flops. So get up, I'm leaning over. Instead of getting down the ladder, moving it over, standing up, I'm just going to get on one foot and reach. Because I'm too lazy to get down and move the ladder.
That's why you learn how to walk.
Yeah, hop, hop, hop. And, okay, most of you are going, well, my employees wouldn't do that. Your employees would do a lot. And this is my best picture. What do you guys see here? Yep. Danger, high voltage. That's an emergency eye wash station. Probably not a good idea to add water to high voltage, unless there's some new medical procedure that I don't know about yet, where like a shock will shoot it out of your eye. Maybe there's something, but I don't know. So be aware, your employees are going to do, sometimes, they're going to do the path of least resistance. Or they're in a hurry, I might cut a corner to get the job done sooner so I can go home or I can be done, and they will do things like this. When I asked about that, I said, well, it was just close to my station, like, seemed like a good idea. Seemed like a great idea. So just be aware of what your employees are doing, and that's what these walk-around assessments are for. Okay, OSHA's top 10. Who's ever seen these lists? I need to get a quick drink of water. Has anyone ever seen the OSHA top 10 list? Swallowed a bug. Okay, so this is 2013's, the 10 most cited list. I just went around, or just went through a lot of common exposures in the workplace. How many of those exposures that we just went through are on this list? Pretty good number. Like, I could have put them all on there, but we'd have been here for 5 hours. So the most common ones, the majority of these we hit. Okay, so this list is put out by OSHA every year. It kind of lets you know where they're writing the most citations. Okay, so if you have these exposures, might be a good idea to make sure that you address these. Specific, or especially when you look at the previous 3 years before that, most cited list for the previous 3 years. What do you notice? Same things every year, there just might be a little variance in order. Okay, so every year, the top 10 things stay the same. So if you have any of those exposures in your workplace, be a pretty good idea to make sure you're on top of those, because that's where a lot of the injuries are happening in the workplace. You'll also get some alerts, like right now, Cal OSHA is on a construction crackdown specifically for fall protection. Okay, Cal OSHA doesn't have the personnel to be a proactive organization, so they're a reactive organization. Okay, whenever there's a bunch of instances in workplaces, specifically like construction, or you're dealing with a high-risk thing like falling, a couple of deaths in the workplace, now they're going to crack down on people. Okay, so be aware that these types of things are going to be sent out, and if you have these exposures in your workplace, make sure that they're addressed. And this one, heat illness, which is a big exposure here in Bakersfield in the Central Valley. There's going to be some proposed changes to the heat illness regulation. One of the specific ones to know is that high heat procedures would kick in at 85 degrees instead of 95 degrees. Okay, and shade would have to be provided at 80 degrees instead of 85 degrees. Okay, so all of a sudden your high heat procedures kick in at 85. How many days a year is Bakersfield above 85 degrees? You're pretty much going to be living in your high heat procedures. Okay, so be aware of some of these upcoming changes. Main points to remember. What I always tell people, kind of in my own words, as far as the IIPP, okay, assess and correct hazards in the workplace and inform and educate your employees. Okay, the compliance part, the discipline policy, a lot of the things that I go out and see, whether it's employee A doing X, Y, and Z, the employer never follows through with discipline with a safety issue or with a work practice issue. Okay, and what that comes into play, again, it's specifically mentioned by Cal OSHA and the IIPP as having a disciplinary program as part of your overall compliance. What we always recommend to our clients is 3 strikes and you're out. First time, I'm going to write you up. Second time, I'm going to write you up and retrain you, because I'm assuming I've already trained you the first time. Okay, the third time, see ya. Because if you can't work following the rules, if you can't do things that are going to protect yourself, how can I expect you to protect me or the company? And that's just a risk that we try to get our clients to understand it's not worth taking. Okay, so 3 strikes and you're out. That's kind of the discipline policy that we try to get our guys to follow. And then this right here, I2P2. Anyone heard of this yet? Okay, so federal OSHA is going to be mandating an IIPP just like the state of California. Okay, now there's states now that have an IIPP, and there's a couple of states that actually have a mandatory IIPP, California being one of them, I think Washington, Hawaii, and someone else. But there could be changes to our IIPP, or Injury and Illness Prevention Program, based on what federal OSHA does. Because if theirs becomes a little more stringent, now all of a sudden we're going to catch up and we're going to have to make adjustments with ours. So I think in September they're going to make some proposed rules about this. So some more information is going to be coming with an updated IIPP potentially. Okay, questions? Everyone asleep? So in the back of the training, I actually broke down the top 10 most cited. I actually listed the 5 specific citations within that. That's for you guys to kind of take and review on your own. But how did we do on time? Is that too fast?
You got 15 minutes. Damn.
Yeah.
Do you actually go out and do inspections for companies?
Yeah. Yeah, I do, man, probably about anywhere between 15 and 30 a month, from an hour north of Sacramento down to San Diego and everywhere in between. So based on our clients and what their exposures are, so obviously a woodworking facility with saws and forklifts and all that stuff, I'm going to see a lot more than the 2-person office building, just a little office. So it kind of depends. Some of our clients I see once a month, some of them I see once a quarter. and just don't tell my boss, but some of them I say, if you need anything, email me. So it kind of depends on the client.
Hey, Dennis,
Yes, sir.
can you just talk a little bit about what you should do if OSHA shows up at a work site or at your office?
Okay, yeah. You would probably know a lot more specifics than I do. What I advise our clients is to run for the hills. No, first, okay, if Cal OSHA shows up, the one thing you want to do is, obviously you're going to let them in. Instruct your employees that if OSHA shows up, okay, to walk them to the office, the main office. Don't let them walk around with your employees. Okay, so if OSHA does show up at your facility, what you want to do is to try to be able to control, okay, the process as much as you can. Okay, so bring them into your office, get them into a secured office, be polite. What can I do for you? What are you looking for? Okay, probably first thing they're going to say, let me see your IIPP. So make sure you have that readily available. Your written specific programs, okay, so ladders or forklifts or any of those types of documentation that you have, you want to make sure you keep that stuff separate. So if you have a ladder, or let's say you have an employee who gets hurt on a ladder and OSHA shows up, okay, again, into your office, into a secured location so they can't just walk around. If they do want to walk around or they want to walk to the scene of an incident, take them directly to that scene. Don't take them on the scenic route around everything to see some of your employees standing on a ladder going like this. Okay, so try to control where they go, how they go, and when they go, as much as you can. So again, keep all of your programs separate. So if he asks for your IAPP, give him just that. Don't keep it all together and hand him a phone book of materials, because now he has access to everything. So if he's just there because of a ladder incident, or he's just there because of a forklift incident, give him just that information. Don't give them more than what it is that they're asking for. Anything you need to add to that? Or call Dave and say, here, I need your help. Yeah.
What kinds of safety topics do you recommend for low hazard places?
It's solely based on the exposures in the workplace. Okay, so for like an office building, the things that we go over, ergonomics is a big one. Okay, so how to set up your workstation, why to set up your workstation that way, what MSDs, musculoskeletal disorders, are, fire safety, things like the power strips under desks and why that's a fire hazard. You'll always want to go over things like your emergency action plans, your evacuation plans. It depends if they have any lifting. Back safety is always a good one. If there's any driving, obviously driving you want to make sure you cover. Those are kind of the basic nuts and bolts ones, though. I mean, obviously going over your IPP, whatever your discipline policies and all of those things are. For an office building, what I always kind of do is give them a topic a month. So provide them with materials. Sometimes I'll go out, if I go out to an office, I'm doing all of them in one shot. It's gonna be like a 4-hour training fest because I don't wanna have to go back every month to a very low hazard facility. So I'll just do it all in one big swoop. And it's not the most effective way to train all at once. So the rest of the year they don't do anything. The best way is probably on a monthly basis or a continual basis. So when it comes to training, what happens a lot of times is they'll do the initial, and then it goes away for 12 months, and then they do it again. Okay, that's not necessarily the most effective. And taking like a PowerPoint, you can Google anything these days, Dr. Google as I call it, and you can get material on everything. Taking some general material and just training your employees on general bloodborne pathogens or general office safety is good. It gives them some information, but it's not specific to your work site. Okay, so the training needs to be specific to what I'm going to be doing, process A, B, C, and the exposures involved with those. So I can't just say, in general, here's what happens. Well, you need to be a little more specific than that for your specific work site. That about it? Yeah? Make sure you tip your waitress.